Good morning, everyone. I'm Philip Jude Bulilan, the last reporter for today's topic, and now let us continue our discussion in the natural law ethics, specific ethical principles under the natural law theory. Ethical principles are part of a normative theory that justify or defend moral rules and or moral judgment that they not depend on one's subjective viewpoint. Ethical principles do not provide a straightforward guide that guarantees the making of an ethically correct decision, nor can they offer guidance about ranking when the principles appear to conflict with one another. Instead, they point only the considerations that should be weighed when making decision. The first principle is the principle of double effect. This principle aims to provide specific guidelines for determining when it is morally permissible to perform an action in pursuit of a good end in full knowledge that the action will also bring about bad results. So we must aware that in our every action, there's possibly a positive and a negative effect to us and to something around us. Bad results must be kept in mind in order to be avoided if possible. The next principle is the principle of inviolability of life. In religion and ethics, the inviolability, blessedness, or sanctity of life, holiness, is a principle of implied protection regarding aspects of sentient emotional life that are said to be holy, sacred, or otherwise of such value that they do not be violated as a violation. So the principle of inviolability reminds us that the human life is sacred because we are made in the image of God, who is sacred. God has ultimate dominion over man and absolute power over human life, and He alone has the power over human life, and He alone has the authority to grant life and to take it away. The third principle is the principle of forfeiture. According to the principle of forfeiture, a person who threatens the life of an innocent person forfeits or loses his or her authority to life. Killing is taking the life of a non-innocent person, whereas murder is taking the life of an innocent person. So even though you might have to kill your would-be assassin, they have fortified their innocence by unjustifiably threatening your life. They loses their own right to life by threatening your life. The fourth principle is the principle of totality. According to the philosopher Thomas Aquinas, all of the organs and other parts of the body exist for the sake of the whole person. So an individual may not dispose of his organ or destroy their capacity to function, except for the extent that this is necessary for the general well-being of the whole body. Destroying an organ or interfering its capacity to function prevents the organ from achieving its natural purpose. The last principle is the principle of stewardship. Stewardship is a way of life, a way that begins with acknowledging God as the creator and giver of all, and responding with generosity and the responsible management of our resources. As disciples of Jesus Christ, we choose to be caretakers of all God have given to us. Gratitude for these gifts and blessings expressed in prayer, worship, offering, and sharing our gifts out of love for God and one another. Exercising stewardship is caring for the gifts God has given us, including the environment, our own personal talents, and other resources. So let us move on to just war theory. Just war theory is a doctrine or beliefs held and taught by a certain group, also referred to as a tradition of military ethics studied by military leaders, theologians, ethicists, and policymakers. The purpose of the doctrine is to ensure war is morally justifiable through a series of criteria, all of which must be met for a war to be considered just. So in engaging in a war, it is not easy as we think. It must be undergone criteria or evaluations that must be morally justifiable or reasonable. Just war theory employed by a country under attack to protect itself is only justified under certain specific conditions. First is lawful authority. For a war to be just and thus justified, it has to come from a lawful and competent authority. In the Philippines, under Article 6, Section 23 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution, only the Congress and not the President by a vote of two-thirds of both houses in joint sessions, voting separately shall have the sole power to declare a state war. So for proper evaluation or justification, it is only reasonable that the sole power to declare state war are on the Congress and not the President to ensure that it is not subjected or affected by personal feelings or emotions. Just cause. According to just war tradition, war is justified only if it is waged to protect the innocent from imminent or approaching harm. So we should consider first the safety of individuals before declaring a war. Third is last resort. Waging a war can never be a first and primary option of a country against another. This also implies that all possible peaceful and legal means to resolve conflict must be truly exhausted and tried before one can resort to war. So of course, war must be the last option. We should conduct first primary options like peace talks or any means to resolve conflict. Fourth is good intention. Countries that decide to go to war should have the element of good faith. A question to ask her could be, is the war for the sake of peace and justice, or is it driven by revenge, power, and greed? So good intention must be the priority in engaging war. It should not be subjective in a way that it's only your personal reasons, influenced by your feelings, that pushes you to go to war. So fifth is reasonable chance of success. War can only be justified if a nation that resorts to it has a reasonable chance of attaining its objective. So in engaging a war, we should also analyze our possibility of winning. It should not be forced if it's obvious that the winning rate is actually low. 6 is right use of means. For a war to be justified, the right use of means should be intrinsically moral and legal. Countries involved must only employ ordinary means in combat. The use of weapons of mass destruction such as nuclear bombs, chemical or biological warfare in violation of this particular condition, and thus morally objectionable. So, because of technological advancement, many countries use advanced weapons for war. However, many of these countries also consider the negative effect it may bring in the environment. Lastly, proportional response determines fairness and justice in establishing the proper balance of legal restrictions governing corrective measures. When someone initiates attack against you, a proportionate is said to be one that suffices to prevent further attacks. A state is legally allowed to unilaterally defend itself, and right or wrong provided the response is proportional to the injury suffered. The response must also be immediate and necessary, refrain from targeting civilians, and required only enough force to reinstate the previous existing state. In conclusion, people need some sort of moral guide through life. Fortunately, we inherit moral standards that govern our reasoning and behavior, an attractive principle by which we can make decisions until one starts to think about it. As a guide for all people, that principle would lead, and thus lead to many conflicts. What is needed in a moral code is something that will enable humans to live with one another in an order rather than in chaos of self-interest action. That would be all. Thank you for watching.